It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you just email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Really excited about today's show. We have Sean Howe. You can find him at Twitter at Sean Howe, and that's Howe. Now, you could find him on his website is SeanHowe.com. The book we're talking about today is Agents of Chaos, Thomas King Forçade, High Times and the Paranoid End of the 70s. I read a chapter of this book in the Rolling Stone. It's an excellent book. This guy's an excellent writer. He captures the time. As you know, I have some connections to this story. But Sean Howe, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, man, thank you so much. Before we get into your book, Agents of Chaos, Thomas King Forçade, tell us about yourself. Who is Sean Howe?
Yeah, sure. I'm a writer in my 40s. I wrote a book before this called Marvel Comics: The Untold Story. And when I finished that book, I thought that was kind of a big, wide-ranging history. Maybe I'll bite off a little less this time. And it turned out that this book took me about 4 times as long to write. So I'm emerging from hibernation with this book.
And how's the book been received? Because from my perspective, you know, like growing up in that time in that neighborhood, I think, boy, we were such obscure people. Like, who would even want to read about us? Back then, we thought we were nobodies, you know? And now to have a guy write a book about this, like it's history, you know? Like, how's the book being received?
It's getting really nice reviews. People are telling me they love it. It's just come out. There was an excerpt in Rolling Stone. There was an excerpt in Reason magazine.
Oh, really?
So trying to reach all the different political polls that I can. And it's been really terrific talking to people who were there. I spoke to a lot of people for the book, but I'm now getting a few stories that I had never heard before, and it's great to hear people say like this really takes me back to what it was like.
Yeah, I heard about the book through TrueAnon, because I subscribe to their, they send me their, I guess I'm on their mailing list or something. And I heard about it that way. And it's really rare for me to find a guest on another show and say, hey, let me interview that guest. But I just love this topic. Now, people can meet Sean Howe in person if they go to the October 2nd at 7 p.m. in Los Angeles at the Stories Book and Cafe. And also to October 6th, he's going to be driving around, this guy, or flying, I guess. October 6th at 6:30 p.m. in Phoenix, Arizona, the Changing Hands Bookstore. Are you flying or driving?
I think I'm going to fly, although it would be a really nice drive. Just that way I can stay in Los Angeles a little bit longer and see some friends.
It is a nice drive. You clear your head out in those deserts, man. I love that drive. I spent a lot of time.
I have made the drive.
Like Tom Forçade, I spent a lot of time in Arizona myself. Okay. All right, let's start with this, man. So the book is mainly about Tom Forçade or all the hippies?
I would say it's mainly about Forçade, but, I came across his story, or I came across the outlines of his story, and I was like, who is this guy that I've never heard of that seems to have had a hand in so many different subcultures, from the Underground Press to, major magazine of the 1970s, High Times, the punk rock movement. He was very active in fighting for journalists' rights. And yet, I'm interested in all of these things, but I had never heard his name. And the more I learned about him, the more intrigued I was, because he was such a man of mystery. So there would be these adventures that he would pop up in, and, he would be, alongside Hunter S. Thompson or Johnny Rotten. But there was also so much that was kind of under a veil about him. And as I kept finding out more about him, I realized, he might be a good way to talk about the 1970s in a larger spectrum. And there's kind of this story of the 1970s that kind of skips from, Altamont was the death of the 60s, and then we had Watergate, and we had gas lines, and then Reagan came along. And there's really not much to connect the 60s and the 80s. And so I wanted to sort of maybe fill in some of the gaps of that history.
Yeah, and what a time to live in New York, man, during that period of time. And Chelsea Hotel, and Lower East Side with CBGBs, all that stuff, man. But it's fascinating, too, because, Tom Forçade tragically took his life the day before Jonestown.
Right. So there were, people I spoke to who remember those two events, finding out about Tom's death and hearing about Jonestown on the radio. And it was, I think, a week before Harvey Milk was killed. So there was this convergence of really terrible news, and a lot of it was, you could say that all of these things were sort of ends of eras in a way. 1978 seemed to me like, the final end of the 60s in a way.
Yeah. So tell us, who was Tom Forçade? Tell us about this man.
So the guy that we know as Tom Forçade just kind of emerged on the radical scene at the end of the 60s when there was a lot of factionalism going on. SDS was splitting into different camps. SNCC had split up into different camps. Underground newspapers were kind of fighting with each other over who was more of a sellout. And this is, of course, just after Chicago 1968. So, the left and the center left are really also